and welcome to Matthew Reads, I guess, and in this video I will be cradling my microphone like a small baby chicken. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm talking about Cynthia Erivo Scalp Tingles, the concept of DNF'ing a book. Yeah, like I say, I might have said it, I want to alter the format of the content on this channel so I'm not just sharting out 10-minute videos which are essentially book reports. There will occasionally be those videos interspersed when it's specifically a book I really want to talk about, but truthfully my content is more selfish than anything. This entire channel, it's literally just a dumping ground for thoughts. That's literally all it is. It's literally just the case of, well, especially when it came to when I was essentially making my book reports, I was just recording them so I had a record of what I thought of the books so I could revisit it if necessary. But then also I write down all of those notes anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, yes, to get onto the topic at hand, I am talking about the fact that I DNF'd a book. And how that made me feel as a person, as a reader. Now I will say I am not a DNF'er, when it comes to books. Literally, even if you just look at this channel, to be honest, even just look at the books behind me, I've got a lot. Never mind the fact that these two shelves are both K-pop. There's a shelf down there that you can't see that's books as well, and I have another shelf out there that's all books and my records. But to me, so long as a book isn't genuinely offensive or truly horrendous, I'm fine reading it. If it's a book that is subjectively mid or doesn't stand out, if it's a book that I've read once and I'm never gonna, read it again after I've put it down, that I can deal with. But the last book I before the book that inspired this entire video, the last book I remember DNF'ing for me was about 5 or 6 years ago when I was doing my master's degree. And for a little context, I did both my bachelor's and my master's degree full time. Both of them were in creative writing. I found them the other day. I could have sworn they were on this shelf. Turns out they were just sat between my bookshelf behind me, and I've got a little chest of drawers there. It was just jammed between them. Sorry, lighting change. I had to turn on some lights because I didn't realise how dark it was getting. So yeah, context, my bachelor's was over 3 years, and then my master's was just a single year after my bachelor's. And the issue was, ladies, the issue with my master's wasn't an issue considering I chose to do it and I knew what I was getting into. It was so much more serious than the bachelor's degree. I realise a bachelor's degree you have to pay for, but in the UK, in the context of it, you have to pay for it is you can just take out a student loan, and I'm gonna be real, I haven't paid any of my student loan back. But with the master's, there might have been some other way to do it, but I had to pay it then and there. So to me, I felt more locked in. Because of that, it meant that but it was expected that you would do all of the reading so that you could participate in the classes. And obviously when everyone's literally paying to be there, obviously they're going to want to participate and get the most out of it. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Having said all of that, the last book I DNF'd before the book that inspired this video was one of the books on the required reading list for the discussion group, and I cannot for the life of me remember its name. All I remember was that it had a white cover, and I think it had something to do with either zoos or animals. Literally no idea what it was. Because I was doing my master's degree full time and needing to read everything, that essentially meant I had to read 2 entire books a week. And mind you, some of these weeks, this was 2 novels in a week. Good for the fast readers who can read that quickly. I am not a fast reader. Unless I super lock into a book and get really into it and I don't have anything else to do, yes, I could read 2 novels in a week. But normally, I'll be honest, at this point in my life, I aim for 2 books a month. And I feel that's normal for a reader. But like, I remember it getting to the point where I was like near the end of one of my semesters, and like I remember I'm just gonna use this book I've got here for reference. I remember being like sat on my kitchen floor in my flat, book open like this, also Last Twilight, the English version. Yes! I will be talking about that later on this channel. Who yassed? It was literally me. Also, context, there's a second video involving this book I'm planning on making as well, but it also requires me to spend like £50 and I'm not excited about that. But yeah, I was sat on my floor with a book, Trisha Paytas style, just bawling my eyes out because I was needing to read 2 novels a week, produce essentially a 500-word book report on one of said novels to share with the class, write material to submit for discussion for the classes, review material that other people had written for classes. I was going to work 16 hours a week, which I realise isn't a lot, but like that still takes time out of my day. And then I was going to like hospital appointments as well in another city. So it was like the build-up of all of those things together where I was like, get that fire exit door, I'm out of here. Like, I think especially towards the start of my master's degree, I had 1 day a week, Saturday, where I didn't have to do anything. Like, that was 1 day a week where I didn't have to, like, go to work, go to university, go to hospital. That was literally the only free day I had. Yeah, that was why I DNF'd the first book I ever DNF'd, literally because I had too much going on, and I physically would not have been able to finish reading it in time. It also didn't help that I don't think I actively enjoyed any of the books I read for university besides like one poetry collection which I've still got on my shelf. But anyway, for the book that I DNF'd recently, I'm not gonna explicitly mention like the name of it, simply because it's a self-published book that I did not realise had less than 30 Goodreads ratings as of me recording this video. So because of that, I also just don't want to rag on the author despite what I'm going to say about the book, since for me personally, like, my dream is to be an author as well. I would love to be able to have my own book on my shelves with me to have a book in shops, and because of that I know how difficult it is to write a book. I know how much time, effort and love goes into writing a book and even getting a book out, you know, be that through either traditional publishing or self-publishing. So yeah, that's why I don't want to like name and shame the book, because like with how few Goodreads ratings it has, it clearly, this sounds horrible, it never like breached containment. It never made it out into the world. But anyway, as to literally why I DNF'd this book, simply put, the writing was atrocious. And I don't mean that in the sense that there was like a few grammatical or punctuation errors that like slip through the cracks. Things like that I can forgive even when it's in like traditional published books from like big publishing houses. Things like that I can like cope with, because like my favourite book is When Horror Was Here by Dustin Tao, and I'm fairly certain that book misspells Charlie XCX as Charlie XCX, like with an E on the end, where Charlie XCX ends with the I. But for this book that I DNF'd, because I'm not talking about When Horror Was Here, unfortunately, but also go read When Horror Was Here. But yeah, with this book I DNF'd, I made it to about page 70 of like 400 before I DNF'd it, which was also roughly the end of chapter 6, so like, that's how far I made it before I couldn't stomach reading any more of it. And I know that sounds like a horrible thing to say, but like in those 70 pages that I did read, I think literally every single piece of dialogue was formatted wrong. Like, I know there are books that do take alternative approaches to dialogue, and I know different books like format it differently, like some use like 2 quotation marks, some use like 1. So I am gonna have to use the power of editing to like make some of my points make more sense. So like, I'm gonna have to read off of my notes what I've written to be able to aid in my editing. So I know most of the books, like most books, take the typical format of, hey, there's some dialogue here, he said. You know, there's your first instance of how it normally is. But the book that I DNF'd, it used the format of, hey, there's some dialogue here, he said. It was like the capitalization of the dialogue tags that was done for literally every piece of dialogue. That was like a major part in me giving up on the book, because I could not just... This is going to sound so much more dramatic than it really is, because like nothing is real. That's how I feel about life. Nothing's real. Like, and that, like, that helps me not be stressed. And like, because of that, that was like, why? I was like, I can't deal with this. I don't want to put up with this. It's horrible. Bye, book. Bye. But then, conversely, like, part of why I felt, like, really bad about DNFing the book was because I could tell that the author cared and held love for what it was they were writing about. Like, the main character comes to terms with their asexuality, like, throughout the book. There's a section, like, the author's note at the end, where the author talks about how important the story was to them to write. And, like, that's what hurt. It was the fact that they clearly cared about the content of what they were writing about, but then when I actually read what they had written, the whole thing felt like a first draft of someone who hadn't learned basic formatting rules. You know, for as much as they cared about what they were writing about, it felt like the care hadn't been put into the content. I understand that not everyone has access to like a friend or someone who could read the book, but like, why did, like, if they had someone read it, clearly they hadn't mentioned it. But because of that, it just meant that the book that ended up getting released was so like poorly crafted. It was just bad quality writing. I think had the book been handed to me and someone said, hey, this is a first draft, I'd have been like, yes, I can see that in the quality of what's been written. Here's what needs changing, and like, here's what needs fixing, that like I can see. Because I'll admit that like, and like, I know when you stare at your own writing, there's only so long you can stare at it before it all just becomes a blob and you like miss things that are obvious. And like, for me, your first draft is meant to be messy. For me, I'm the type of person, like, my first draft is simply for getting your ideas out of the head and onto the page. And, like, just so you can get that slop somewhere so it at least exists before you forget it. You can clean it up through rereading, redrafting, and re-editing. And then I'm gonna be honest, because I felt so guilty about DNFing this really poorly written book, I ended up like going online to see if there were like other people who like actually felt guilt, like literal guilt. Like, I felt guilty for putting the book down and saying, no, I'm not reading this anymore. Literally all I did was I googled like DNFing books, and like one of the first results that came up for me was on r/books on Reddit, and it was a thread that someone had literally made, and as I've written down, called Guilt Over DNFing Books, and the user was Zero Gravity. So I am just gonna like read out a couple of quotes that I've like slapped down to like just to help make my point. Like, they said that, how the heck do I get over the guilt of putting down a book and not finishing it? If a book is terrible, in brackets, bad writing, super problematic subject matter, etc., I have no problem DNFing it. But if I just don't like it, I have a harder time. Sometimes I can force myself to get through a book that I'm not enjoying, but other times it feels impossible and I just can't physically make myself keep reading it. But I also don't want to officially DNF it. I feel bad for the book. Like, no, I really want to like you. I do. It's not you, it's me, open brackets. But really, it's actually you, close brackets. And yeah, literally that put into words like what I thought. Like, if a book is terrible, bad writing and super problematic, then yeah, I'll put it down. Like, if it's problematic, bye, rot. But like, even if it's bad, like I've said, I'm okay reading a mid book. Like, if the writing is fine. This is like the first one that I've experienced where the writing is genuinely atrocious. Felt like I had to, but because there was like an earnest vibe to like and from the author, that's where I felt bad. Then Zero Gravity on Reddit again, they also said, how do I get over the guilt of a DNF? I know logically life is short and I shouldn't read books I don't enjoy, but that feels easier said than done. And once again, weirdly, this is where I feel a bit funny because I know that I've said earlier in this video that nothing is real. And that helps me come to terms with like bad things. And it like helps me get through things. But like even saying nothing's real and being faced with a horrendous book, I still feel bad. I'll say this coming, like reading those paragraphs coming from, I think it was literally the second result I found on Google when I googled DNF'ing books. Like it was very validating in showing me that like I'm not the only person who feels guilt, as stupid as it is. Because yeah, writing is an art form and a novel is a piece of art in its own right. Like that's what I feel at least. Art deserves to be appreciated and supported. But in that, as the Boulay brothers say in Dragula, in the context of drag is art and art is subjective. Because of that, if I like think about conventional art, my favourite pieces of conventional art are really stupid. Like, one of my favourites is a piece of glasswork that's literally called Woman with Shrimp. That, like, I ended up looking up and was made in the 1930s, created by, and I'm gonna have to read this off my notes, otherwise I will butcher this name, Ercole Barovier, and it's, like, currently in the Chrysler Museum of Art. And you want to know what it is? I'm gonna slap a picture up on screen here. It's literally a glasswork of a woman giving a shrimp a piggyback ride. It's so stupid, but I love it. I also really enjoy Two Rats by Vincent van Gogh because it's literally just two rats having a snack. Then to go back to the Reddit thread of that Zero Gravity made, like one of the responses they got literally says, life is too short for boring books. If you're not enjoying reading something, open brackets, and it's not for like class or work, close brackets, then get something else you enjoy. It's okay to stop reading something that is boring. Don't feel bad at all. You can always try again later if you want. Honestly, yeah. Like, I think part of why I cried on the floor Trisha Paytas style over the book during university was that because that book was for university and I felt like I was obligated to read it, because I wouldn't have been able to participate properly in the discussion had I not read it. Whereas, like, with this book that I DNF'd for myself, once again, I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to, like, rag on it. And I will say, I think when it comes to, because I'll be honest, I don't have a library that's super accessible to me, or at least a particularly good one. Like, I tend to, that ends up, like, leading me to read more books that I'd want to read, as opposed to just, like, going into a library and browsing and finding something to be like, yeah, I might like that. You know, I think if I were to live somewhere more metropolitan, or that I had, like, a massive library that I know is going to have the kind of books that I'd like, I'd be more inclined to take things. You know, like my closest library, I feel like it's more likely just to have the kind of books that you'd see in like an airport or a supermarket book section, you know, ones that are literally just bestsellers, or like those romance ones that have the same white ladies on the front. And then, like, another part of, like, why I know I felt guilty was because I spent my own money on the book. And it's like, I've spent my real money dollars on this book and it's bad. And I feel bad about it because I feel like I've also wasted my money now. Once again, because, like, a lot of my books I just, like, buy, as opposed to, like, getting from a library, that's why I think I'm more inclined to read a book that's mid. Because, like, I've spent the money, even if I'm not, like, Gagatrondra 3000 The House Down Dupree about it, like, I'll still read it. No, I did end up looking at more than just that, that one Reddit thread about DNFing books. There was this other article I found called The Writer's Dilemma When to DNF Books, written by Courtney Joe, and they said some of the reasons for actively DNFing a book are writing style, Groundhog Day, not caring or disliking the main character and the genre. And I will say I definitely do feel differently about the things on these lists. But the writing style I absolutely do agree with. Like I've mentioned, the writing style of this book that I DNF'd recently was atrocious. Simple, so I stopped reading it. And I mean, I suppose it wasn't so much the style, but more the quality. But like the quality that went into said style, so... and then Groundhog Day, according to this article, refers to the concept of a character being stuck in the same experience over and over. I don't necessarily agree with this one, because I know I've definitely read books that have this concept of like the Groundhog Day concept where they're stuck in the same thing over and over. But I feel like, because that in itself is a concept, the concept of Groundhog Day, I feel like it's what the author does with that concept. Because for me, Robbie Couch's If I See You Again Tomorrow does the Groundhog Day concept exceptionally, and it's one of my favourite books, like, of all time. I think it's one of 5 books that's currently sat on my, like, favourites tab on my Goodreads account. You know, not caring about or disliking the main character, I'll be honest, I think I have read books where I've not really liked the main character or gelled with the main character, but there was something else that I felt worthwhile in the book that, like, kept me reading. So I'm... like, I see the point, but I don't know whether I fully... Like, I do too. I agree to a point. And then genre... Once again, I do kind of agree with that. I think I definitely struggle with fantasy. It's something that, like, I've mentioned many times, and it's not just with, like, fantasy books. It happens with fantasy video games that, like, fantasy needs to be a specific vibe, but what that vibe is, I don't know. It's just something that, you know, I feel it. Sophie Cates' core stream, Feel It by Sophie Cates. It's just something I can feel when I read it. Yeah, I really struggle to come up with, like, a clever way to finish this. Like... especially when some of the articles and things that I read online where, like, people were talking about DNF'ing and they all finished theirs by saying, well, you just have to find the things you like, otherwise you won't have to DNF books. And I mean, obviously, but at the same time, that doesn't stop me from feeling guilty. And, like, a lot of things were like, well, you won't feel guilty when you find what you like. Sister, that doesn't help. I need help stopping feeling guilty if I don't like the book. Why have I gone blurry? Hello, I'm back. I've de-blurred myself now. I was just so overcome with emotion that I just had to turn blurry. My emotion was too powerful. Anyway, I think for me, like, I will say at least I think I'm aware of, like, why I feel guilty. It's like, partially I know how much work goes into, like, writing and making a book and getting a book out. And another part is, like, the financial aspect. Like, I think that's mainly why I feel guilty. I just have to get over the fact of feeling guilty, and it's not that deep. And literally, like I said to myself, nothing's real. I don't know. My biggest issue is with my brain, and I think that is going to bring me to the end of this video. Subscribe if you want to. Let me know in the comments, like, how do you feel about DNFing a book? Like, what is your criteria for DNFing a book? Because I'll be honest, at this point, I think mine is if the writing is atrocious or if it's, like, upsetting. Like, that's it. And I'm so sorry to say I am not a changed reader, so you're welcome. That what an awful ending. Bye.